Whoever's online, I just wanted to double check that you can hear me. I just turned the microphone on. Good. Hopefully it's not too loud. Well, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I know Michelle is here too, and she's going to be the person on the computer, and she might ask you to ask a question, and then you type it in so she can respond back to me. And the first one was what program you're in. So if you could type that back, that would be very helpful. Kind of helps me direct the conversation. So we've got someone here in the physician assistant program, and so find out what else you're doing. Today is about critical thinking and test taking. You know, a lot of times when students come to the office, they'll say, I spent a lot of time, thought I knew the information well, and then when I went into the test, I didn't feel it reflected my knowledge. And often what I hear is that the students think they have a test anxiety. You know, they're just, that's creating, and that's not, I mean, that can be a valid reason that you could have that. But often what it seems to be is just not the unexpected style of questions, the, you know, the level of questions, the critical thinking that you have to do, and what you focus on and how you focus. So today what I want to do is really kind of go back to what do I mean by critical thinking. I want to break that down so you understand. And I've really tried on this slideshow to give lots of examples so that it's concrete, not just theory. So I hope that helps you and you can relay it to whatever program you're in. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's review a little bit. What are you doing first of all before the test you ever start the test? Because you know that's very, very important. So I just want to make sure you're doing things that you probably just best practices. This says review the objectives before and after study. Many professors give you objectives. After you study, you ought to just revisit them. Look at them beforehand so you have a framework of what's going to be important in what you're going over. This is after the lecture. You're on your own. So you've had the lecture. They've emphasized, so you've got those verbal cues and maybe, you know, other cues from them, what's important. So just look over the objectives. And then once you've looked over the objectives, then go ahead and start reading through the material. When you're finished, however, when you're looking at them and writing and whatever you do, go back to the objectives. That'll let you know if you spent your time well. In fact, even do it periodically while you're studying. Make sure that you're actually involved. And the best way to do that is to just reflect back on those objectives as you're doing it and say, okay, am I even processing the right information? So that's number one. The other one I often ask people to do is to summarize a slide or a lecture, if you can, but slides, break it down more. So not just, you know, look at what seems to be important for that material. If you see a slide with a chart in it, then summarize the chart with what's important, what are the important relationships to the chart. You know your professors better than I do. You know now, we're into the classes, you've had probably at least one exam, and if not, then you need to be asking these questions. Are these going to be the kind of questions where you just basically regurgitate data? You know, I need to know that 25% of the population die from cardiovascular disease, and 25% die from cancer, and 10% die from diabetes. Or do I need to know that cancer and cardiovascular diseases are where 50% or the majority of people die from as far as from diseases? So you'd have to look at the slides differently, analytically, and put a question at the top of the slide that you think you might see on the test. Draw things out. Anytime there's processes that you need to know or any kind of structures that could be drawn, draw them, list them. That's a good way while you're studying to do that so that you're not just passively reading. Sometimes you have to memorize. So use mnemonics. Find whatever works for you to memorize. Rewriting it, flashcards. Be careful with flashcards that you don't make too many and never look at them again. But whatever can work for you, do that. Charts, again, as I mentioned, listen for the verbal cues for what's important. What's the main idea and the purpose? So that's just some we talked about this in earlier workshops, but I wanted to review that a little bit because unless you've studied right, the test, you know, isn't going to matter. So now let's go on and look at this. This is where I'm trying to focus on. As you know, okay, Back again, isn't it? Okay. All right. As you know, there are all different kinds of test questions that you can get. If I use the mouse, if you can see what I'm doing, I am going to the bottom two rungs of this. This is the level of critical thinking. Remembering and understanding are the lowest possible levels. That's where you spent a lot of your school time. Up through undergrad, you might get to applying. Graduate school is all about these top three levels. And unless you had certain kinds of undergrad degrees like engineering, particularly, I can think of, you probably have not spent a lot of time exercising your brain and analyzing, evaluating, or creating. Now, some of you have, if you've been in careers up until now, and that's a natural part of careers, is that you're in your career, you're often analyzing situations, applying the knowledge that you have, creating new solutions. So you have had this practice. So the brain's used to it. You're just having to convert it into the knowledge textbook kind of way. And so it's not that you aren't doing these things. You probably have done them your whole life. It's just this way more for, I think it's where I stand. In the context of your coursework now. So I really want to spend a little bit of time. Let's look at these. Think about critical outcomes in medical education. What are some examples? Now, if you look at these, look at the very first one. Define the following terms: nephritis, ulceration, and sarcoma. That's at the basic level, knowledge. That's definition, memorize, matching. Wouldn't you love that? But if you have a whole bunch of them, memorizing is not easy. I'm not trying to discount memorizing, but because you do have to do some memorizing for foundational knowledge. That's what that is. Compare ischemia with infarction. That's more comprehension. Compare, contrast. Can you understand the differences? So that's, did you understand it? If you can compare and contrast, you're at that level. Select which possible enzymes might be deficient in a patient with elevated levels of phenylalanine in their urine. All right, now we're getting up to a higher level. You got to think almost backwards. What do I know about elevated levels? What do I know causes it? Certain enzymes. So now you're having to critically think. This is now starting to get to that higher level, the application analysis level. And of course, the top one is to create something new. And that's considered the synthesis or creation. And that's just for an example here, create a treatment protocol for diabetes. So these are just some general examples for each level. But I've gone a step further. I did this one so that you could understand what kind of questions will you see and what can you do to help prepare for those kind of questions. If it's a knowledge or knowing kind of memorize, you're going to see questions that start with define, identify, list. That's that memorize. I had to have these things memorized. So any test question that starts that way, you know you're at the lowest level, but it's the memorize level. All I need to do is regurgitate these. An example, define diabetes. So I'm taking that topic, diabetes, and I'm going to take it all the way through the levels of critical thinking, using diabetes as the example. What do you do to help prepare for that? Anything that you just have to, and look at your objectives, by the way. If professors give you objectives with these key words in it, they're letting you know right away what level of knowledge you have to have. So if you see define, list, then you know you just have to be able to do those things, to be able to regurgitate the information. If you see in the objectives things like summarize, discuss, explain, compare, you've gone up a step. Now you better not only be able to list it, but understand the meanings behind it. So an example diabetes question for that would be, what are the associations between diabetes and obesity? So you could give me a definition for diabetes, you can give me a definition for obesity, but you better understand those two things well to be able to talk about the associations between the two. So you've gone up another level. Look again at the objectives to see if this is the type of questions they're expecting. Applying. Now you're ready to apply your knowledge. Illustrate, show, demonstrate, solve. Those are the kinds of verbs that you're going to see that is expecting you to apply your knowledge. So let's look at my example. illustrate biochemically what happens in obesity that causes insulin resistance. All right, so now this is at the biochemistry level. You probably have to draw out a diagram, or maybe there is one and you're having to explain it, but you probably have to draw out a diagram to illustrate or describe what happens with obesity that causes insulin resistance. So we're going again, two different, you're now applying your knowledge to something else. Those three, as I said, you probably have the most practice with in school. In real life, the rest of these have probably come into play, but not necessarily in school. So let's look at those. Analyzing. Analyze is going to be one of the verbs in any of the objectives. Connect, infer. Now, the word infer you might not see, but that's the one I've used here as the example. If increased cholesterol in a cell membrane makes the membrane less fluid, then will more cholesterol help promote insulin resistance? So here's an infer question. You've got to know about it, and you've got to be able to answer, and I'm sure yes or no is not going to be correct. You'd have to go into an explanation as to why. So you can see you're having to take the information, and this is where you should be noticing questions. You take information from the question, and then you have to apply it, infer it, and predict what the answer is. Going on. Now we're getting into clinically related questions many of you might see. Assess, this is where you're evaluating. And in that, look for, in the objectives, words like assess, determine, recommend, justify, discriminate. So you now have to justify, and that's what I used for this one. A 29-year-old woman has presented to the office. Perfectly good question here. It's all about the vignette. She's obese, has type 2 diabetes, and is reporting elevated blood pressures measured at home and at work. You are considering starting her on an, I can't even read that, angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor. Good for you if you all understand that. Justify your reason for this action. There's where you have to do the evaluating. So you have to be able to back up why that is a good course of treatment. Often in these kind of questions, you will get, what's the next best step? That's an evaluation too. You'll get a vignette, and it's like, what's the next step? And then you're evaluating and going to the next step. And that doesn't mean necessarily treatment. I'm not just talking about medicine here, but in anything, if it was in an experiment, and you get a result in that experiment, and that result is given to you, and then you need to do what's the next step. Did you get what the other, is there other person on or not?
Pharmacology.
Okay, so pharmacology, ask if there's a lot of research based in their courses. Well, I mean, you can hear me. So is there a lot of research in your courses? I mean, is that a big expectation for pharmacology is my guess. So you're going to get a lot of questions of what's the next step in this research or in this process. And the last one is creating, and definitely if research-based is your area, that's the bottom line. You are creating research. So design an experiment to test the effectiveness of this enzyme inhibitor as a treatment for type 2 diabetes. And you would have to do that. So I hope you can see from this how it went from define diabetes to design an experiment about diabetes and the differences in the questions and what you're expected to do. And that's the difference in the analysis and in your level of thinking. So now the strategies, as I was mentioning, what are you going to do? If it's just memorize, you're going to write, list, recite, draw. This will be recorded, by the way, so go back if you need to look at this list and say, how do I study for those things? I know she mentioned it. How do I study for those higher order type questions? Well, that's what this slide is about. Understanding, discuss it with your peers. We just were discussing ourselves, group review sessions. That's how you find out if you understand a concept. Take turns discussing with your peers. Sitting and listening to explanations is passive. You have to be the one explaining it. That's how you know if you know it. Apply. Review the process and then ask yourself. So whatever it is that you're looking at, ask yourself, what would happen if I change or if something changes? What would happen if this nerve, was injured at this level? What muscles would be affected? That's the applying. What would happen if this drug was given at this level? That's the applying. So ask yourself those questions when you're studying. They may give you a certain normal value of something, and you are to find out, then your question is, what would happen if that normal value were less than that? What happens? What would happen if that normal were more? That's how you need to be studying. Predict the outcomes based on the data presented. I think I get into that one a little bit later. So you are given data. Oh, and it's on the next one too, applying and analyzing, actually, that one. But you're given data, so you predict the outcomes. You're going to notice I have that same one under analyzing. These are kind of fluid. I mean, there's not like a dividing line between levels of knowledge. In analyzing, you're going to define relationships, but you are going to interpret the data without reading an author's interpretation. So if you are reading about something, research, if you are looking at diagnoses, you should be able to come up with it. That's the analyzing. Diagnosing something, predicting the outcome of a research project. That's analyzing. Evaluating. Be able to discuss different views on that same topic. Be able to prioritize what's the next best course of action, whether it's in clinical or whether it's in research. Does this person do research? Okay, that's all right. Creating, design an experiment, create a graphical representation of given process or of the concept. So anytime, that's just writing it out without looking at it or creating it. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was kind of addressing that as also. So we have clinical and research, so I want to make sure I kind of go back and forth with examples. Okay, for the research people, let's look at this. Starting at the bottom here, the lower order, ask a question. You're going to notice what I'm doing here. This is the scientific method. If you learned it in junior high, you're definitely doing it now. The scientific method, you have to ask a question, then you have to do some research, observe, to kind of come up with a possible hypothesis, and you propose this hypothesis, and then you design the experiment and collect information. We're going up. We're going from remember, understand, apply, analyze and draw the conclusions, evaluate by drawing the conclusions, and then based on those conclusions you create, you actually start all over. You usually ask another question. It's endless. Oh, okay, based on that, what does it mean if? And then you start all over again. So this is very similar to what you're doing in the research. So I just wanted to take some time again just to refresh your memory on that. You are going to get test questions of all those styles. So now let's get into what you need to do when you're taking a test. First, cover up the answers and read the question at the bottom. That's usually if they are clinical vignette kind of questions. If they are more direct, then no, this doesn't work. But if it starts off with a story, skip the story and go to where there's the question mark. And so that you can look at that first and then you frame what you're reading within that question. You know what important information is there. And don't look at the answers. Try not to look at the answers. Just look what the question is, think about what it is, and then maybe look at your answer choices after that. When you're looking at the question, decide if it's a clue or a concept. Well, what the heck does that mean? If it's a concept, it means that you're going to see words like describe, explain, manage. If it's a clue, you'll see words like which. So if it's a clue, somewhere in the question, there's going to be a statement that will lead you right to what the answer is. If it's describe, you may not even have to read the whole question. If it's describe or explain or manage, you probably have to read the entire question. So that's just all you're doing now is strategy. You haven't tested your knowledge yet. You're going, okay, it's saying which of the following. So I'm going to read the top, and when I get to which of the following, oh, that's it. I don't have to read anymore. Go to look at your choices. If it says describe or explain what you would do next, you probably have to read through everything to get to where the answer is. It's just a way of framing your brain when you're thinking of the question, when you're going through the question. So then you read the vignette or the question. You stop reading, as I just mentioned, when you get to what you think the answer is going to be. What do you do if you stop? You go and you look at your choices. You find every answer. When you think you know the answer, go down and look. When you think you've got it, or it's down to 2 or whatever. Now go back and read through the question again, whether you have one answer figured out or 2 answers figured out. And read the question again with those answers in mind. Hopefully, if you have 2 figured out, something in that question will help you eliminate 1. And if you have 1 figured out, everything in that question will verify that, or in your answer that you've chosen, will verify that this was the correct answer to choose. So this is just strategy. You look at the question, don't look at the answers, kind of think of what it might be. Then read through the whole question itself. Select the answer that you think is correct. Go back up, read through the question a second time to see if that answer fits. And if, by chance, this last one is kind of funny, but apparently this is more a numbers game if you're in Vegas. If you are down to 2 and you absolutely have no idea which one it is, according to Vegas odds, so don't come back on me if you lose this, pick the bottom answer. The, I guess, rationale behind that is the right answer has made you read through all the other answers ahead of it. I don't know. So take that for what it's worth. I got this from someone who writes standardized tests. So that's where that came from. All right. Change answers to questions only if you've erred or misread the question. Secondary to that is, or if you find information later in the test that makes you correct a previous answer. You know, sometimes they'll do that. There'll be something later in the test in the description like, oh, wait a minute. That's right. Normal blood pressure is such and such. I remember answering that wrong up there. Do not go back and change answers because you just aren't sure and you think now this other one's right. It's usually not. Trust your gut as much as you can on those. So change them only if you see, oh my gosh, I completely misread that question, or I skipped right over the right answer. That's fine. But that's a biggie. That's a big mistake. You know you've all made it. You've gone back and changed answers and you've kind of regretted it afterwards. I don't have up here another one. Students will come in and talk to me about time during a test. First of all, the stress of time is no fun. If you get that anxiety, you need to put yourself in that situation before a test and practice that. That could be with sample questions from a question bank. If there are 20 questions and you know you have only 10 minutes, put yourself on a 10-minute timer. Say, I'm going to, or 20-minute timer. Practice that. Put yourself in that situation. It's the only way you'll get better at it. So that you can practice, okay, I'm on a timer, I got to let the anxiety not take over, let me see if I can do this in the comfort of my home, and then I'll do it a little bit better each time. So that's number 1. Put yourself on a timer if that is probably, and practice that. Another one is at the same time when you are in an exam. Okay, you're in an exam, and you want to allow 20 minutes to review your questions. Then look at the clock, divide it up. There's 50 questions. I have 2 hours. If I want 20 minutes, I now have 100 minutes. If I have 100 minutes, I better be done with half of them, 25 of the 50, in 50 minutes. And then when it's a halfway at 50 minutes, that would be 1:45. So look at the clock. At 1:45, where am I? Am I halfway through? Oh, no, I better speed it up a little bit. Or, oh, good, I'm in good shape. And write it down on a little piece of paper. So that's another just simple strategy to just divide it out, to figure out how you're doing on time. So I didn't write that in there, but those are 2 other examples that I give students that come in and talk about test anxiety or time tests that just they don't like or they ran out of time. All right, approaching questions. First of all, always keep in mind the major concept. This is where you play student. What are we studying about right now? If we're studying about the heart, then all the answers selected that don't have anything to do with cardiovascular system, I can probably eliminate without knowing anything. I mean, really always have it in context of what you're studying. Now, some, of course, might go across, and I know that. But don't forget that. So here's another set of, same thing, some more approaches to questions. You already had this. I realized I just did this twice, so I don't think I need to go over it again. Yep. But that's a big one there. I think I did. I think I just put that slide on there twice. The biggest thing there is remember the major concepts. Yes?
Should you always go to the questions that are bigger first to save on time or work, or the smaller, easier questions?
Well, there's no right answer. Don't you hate that when somebody says that? But let me tell you how you go with it. You need to build your confidence. You know, if you have several professors that are given questions, you know certain ones you've got down, go to those. Get those done. Kind of helps get rid of that cortisol that freaks you out and makes you not think well. Then that's good to do. If for some people they want to make sure they have enough time for the big questions, it's all strategy. It is. Are the big questions worth more than the little questions? If not, no. If they're not worth any more, no, not really. Get as many of the questions done if time is the problem. If concepts and, okay, here's the weakest area, there's an area of topic that you really know going in you didn't spend enough time on. Leave that for last. Make sure you get all the other things done well and take your time and just play the numbers game on the last ones and hope that, you know, if you got all the other ones really well, you took your time on those, that maybe you get most of the rest of them right or half of them right, then numbers-wise you're still going to be fine over the overall test. Is that answer? I mean, I hope that answers your question. If it's all things equal, I'd still probably do the shorter ones first just to get them done. And then the longer ones, you know, I can see both ways. So just however you can work it out. I wish I had a better answer for you. Okay. All right, so let's do some samples. So this next part is just to kind of think, all right? I want you to think. Look first of all at the major concept here, all right? Here's what's being taught. Remember how I said always keep in mind the framework of what you're learning. Don't overanalyze. The framework of what I'm supposed to know for this test. You know who this is especially hard for? If you've come from another career and you have done a lot of analyzing. It's almost harder to go back and just be the student and say, what was on the notes? Don't go all the what ifs, what was on the notes? That's what you have to do. So here's what the notes say. The heart muscle is called self-firing because it contracts to cause the beating of the heart without any external stimulation. Focusing on important words here. All right, now let's go to the question. First of all, it's starting with a bunch of stuff, so go down here and read the last sentence. This phenomenon is most likely due to which of the following? Do you remember when I talked about clue or concept? Which was part of the concept ones, which means you've got to read everything and take it all in. Pretty sure. Oh, let's go ahead. A patient's EKG reveals 2 P waves instead of the usual 1. The wave associated with atrial contraction for every QRS complex, which coincides with ventricular contraction. This phenomenon is most likely due to which of the following? Okay, EKGs have to do with what? You got one person here that's going to answer that out loud. EKGs, what does that measure? What's that? When you're getting a test on your an EKG, what are they testing?
Heart sounds.
Heart, right? You're testing your heart. This is all about the heart muscle. So we're all on the same page. This is about the heart. So here's your choices. Increased excitation from the vagus nerve, increased excitation from the phrenic nerve. We're wondering why is this person's heart doing things weird? A problem with the feedback loop intervention from the CNS, a block in the conductive system within the heart muscle. All right, what do we know about the heart? It's called self-firing because there's no external stimulation. Okay? So keeping that in mind, this is one of those kind of questions. How many of those answers are about external things that are causing the heart to not work right? We've got A, B, the vagus nerve, that's on the outside. It's not with the heart. The phrenic nerve, that's somewhere else. Something about a loop. There's only one answer there. Oops. There's only one answer that has to do within the heart itself, and that's this one. A block in the conduction system, right there it is, within the heart muscle. Tie that in with over here. What contracts to cause the beating of the heart without any external stimulation. So if you know this well, you would know that this answer, this is knowledge too, would be the only one, because it's the only one listed that has to do with within the heart. And that's how you have to kind of look at the questions and answers. It takes what you know and it applies it all the time. All right. This one is clinical, but not really. So pharmacology, you can do this too, because you're looking at an x-ray. 15-year-old girl comes to, oh wait, first of all, where do you go first? To the question. What developmental problem is indicated in the abdomen radiograph? So you look at the picture, okay? What do you notice there, Michelle, in the picture? What looks weird?
Spine.
The spine, what's it doing?
It's curved.
It's curved, isn't it? All right. Now, knowing that, now look at what it says. A 15-year-old girl comes to your center for a routine sports physical. Is that important? Maybe her age. Okay. She's going to be doing gymnastics and track at school. Is that important? No. And that's what happens with a lot of these questions. You get stuff in there that's not important. A routine lab is ordered, and a total erect spine is ordered to rule out developmental or acquired spinal problems. Refer to the image. Which one is this? She's 15. She's a girl. She's healthy pretty much. Which one would it be? You have any idea? Which one have you heard of that a lot of children get that are really pretty healthy? Scoliosis.
So I'd eliminate the other one.
Yeah. And the answer is scoliosis. Because the other ones aren't about usually normal. I mean, this girl's, normal, plus the lab results there. So the point of that one is eliminate stuff that's not important in a slide. Okay, here's one for public health, because we have had public health people come to these sessions too. So I tried to find one here. All right. First of all, you go to the question. It's kind of a little longer there. Concerning hospice and palliative care, which of these statements is true? The goals and functions of hospice and palliative care has been approved by, and then there's a list. If you look at that question, nothing above it is significant. Nothing. All the stuff above that question does is explain what palliative care is, what hospice does, and all that. But this comes right down to policy. And if you were in public health, this would make sense to you. Basically, they're asking who approved all the goals and functions. It's just what body of it did. So my point with that question is, make sure, again, in context of what you need to know, it does happen, where the question at the bottom of the long explanation is all you need to know. And the other thing is about this one that I like, or as an example, is which one of these statements is true. They basically, sometimes, not in this case, they've given you 5 true-false questions. It's just like, but this one is just one of these is true, and it happened to be the number 1. Doesn't really matter for you, I know, but it is number 1, the United States. Okay, just for your own information. Okay, and then there's the answer. Now, this was from a program we have, you have it, all of you have access to it, called Exam Master. Exam Master, however, is probably more based or focused on the clinical areas as opposed to the research areas. There is a good area for public health, I found. So if anybody, pass the word on. But other than that, I would say it's just clinically based. Physician assistant, it has a section on it. Have you looked at that one, Jay, physician assistant? All right, I'll show it to you. But I'll show that to you in a minute. And then, but what it does is this is how it looks. You're given a question, a radio, you select. Down here, I cut it off. It says submit. Right after you submit, it shows you whether you're right or wrong. And then you can click on explain, and it brings up the reason why it's right or wrong. And if you get it right and you're absolutely sure you got it right, there's no reason to click explain. You just move on. It's if you guessed and got it right, or if you just completely got it wrong. That's when you look at the explanation. But it is found on Exam Master. It's found at this address. If you look at it, what I've done is take a screenshot where I just was for public health, because I think last time we had somebody from public health come in, and that's where the public health, it's called Preventive Medicine and Public Health, is where you'll find a series of questions there, and it was quite a few. You will see there's a group of questions for physician assistants programs, a group of questions for nursing, and for pharmacy. Now, pharmacy, it's going to be clinically based, but they're there, and we'll take a look at them now. I know pharmacology, pharmacy aren't really the same. I know that, but you might, when we look at it in just a second, you can, I'll click on both so that you can take a look and see whether or not it would be applicable. But these are questions that you can practice, and mainly it's that practicing that higher level of thinking, because it does take more practice. It's not just about going into a test knowing the material. It's about going into the test having practiced the style and thinking you have to do to get to the right answer. I think that is what you develop over the first block.
Pharmacology is actually listed in
Oh,
the
okay.
medical subject review.
Yeah, and we can look at that, but I can tell you that physicians, and I don't need to tell the pharmacology person there, it's probably their weakest area of study. And they can say yes or no. But so we'll look at that, but I bet it's very clinically based. You know, what drug to give to this, not research-based, but we can look and see. Pharmacy might have a little bit better on that, and they might, again. So before I go on to this, if the person on there, you know, wants just some other general questions, or if, Jay, you have some general questions for me while I get out of this and go to where the exam master is and demonstrate that. Oh, wait. Almost done. Go back in there again. Okay. Again, this is a Toledo purchased question banks, not Toledo authored. Big difference. You know, so these are standardized questions found nationally. And it starts, well, if you've never been on it before, you go to this place that says not registered yet, and you put in your University of Toledo email, and it'll send you a quick password right away. You should get it. If you don't have it right away, it means something's weird, and let me know. We contact the tech support. You should get it right away. And then every time you log in with your Toledo. So for you, it would be at rockets.utoledo.edu. And that gets you in with it, whatever your password is. Now, the dashboard is what you're seeing here. It's just your list of different tests that you've taken. So let's go to create exam. You're creating your own exams based on your own program. I'm going to look real quick just so you can expand it. See pharmacy review, that's for their board exam. Supplemental medical sciences for pharmacy. Just going to look real quick. These computers, all right. And as you can see, here are the choices. The person online, if they could let Michelle know, do you feel like any of these might be relevant? You know, if you do, and there's like, for pharmacology here, there's 305 questions. I was thinking maybe pharmacological agents, drugs acting on specific systems, I'm not sure. So you can take a look at this and see if this would be relevant to your area as sample questions. But I'm going to go back real quick. You're in PA, right? Yeah, so we've got 2 PA students here, so I'm going to go back to that one. And we're going to go to, again, medical subject review for physician assistants. All right, so now you can see throughout your 2 years, there are areas that you can access. Right now, what you're focused on is anatomy. So here's anatomy, but you can see that there is pathology. So there's physical diagnosis, physiology, preventive medicine, lots of them. But right now you're doing pathology. And you can keep filtering it down. Every time you see one of these triangles, it means you can click on it to go further. So here's the abdomen. That's what you guys just finished, correct? Yes. So now there are several questions for the abdomen. So I don't know which ones of these. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Like, there's only one question here for the esophagus. So, you know, so I'm just going to say the abdomen. So it's going to pick all questions about the abdomen. And then when you're doing this on your own, you select the number of questions that you want. Did we go through this? I don't know. Is this new for you? The questions? Is this new? I didn't know. So couldn't remember if at the workshop we did these. And I think I kind of talked about it. Here's where you can put yourself on a timer if that's an issue, or whether you can just study. I'm going to just take 5 questions so you can see what they look like.
This is free and open to the public, correct?
It is. By you being a U Toledo, it's open to University of Toledo students. It wasn't free. But you don't pay anything. It's free to students. I know the AEC paid for part of it, and Mulford Library paid for part of it. So it's a subscription service that we renew each year. So we want you to use it because we paid for it. So please try it out. So now I've got 5 questions about this, and you can either go to Take Test. That's if I want to put myself on a timer because that's an issue, or I'm just studying this information and I want to see how well I know it. That's my choice today. Take Learning, I ignore. It's a new module that I don't think is really that effective. It allows you to look at the explanation before you submit an answer, and I just think it's too easy to do that. You know, I just think you might fall back on that too much. So I don't recommend that one. Take Study. Okay, here we've got another slide. All right. Where is the abdominal gas located in the attached film? So here it is. It's a bunch of little arrows showing an area right here. So as a physician assistant taking anatomy, they would need to look at this slide and figure out where this area is, and then based on that, take a guess on where they think it is, and then go over here and guess which one of these. 8 choices. Ooh, yuck. 8 choices. So I've got 2 physician assistants who've just taught this or learned this, but they may have no idea either. I know I have no idea, and I don't think online knows, so don't feel bad if you don't know. So if we were going to venture to take a guess, is it below the diaphragm? It is? It's not in the rectum. I think I got that one figured out. Colon. Well, maybe. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Colon. No, it doesn't do that. Splenic fixture in the liver due to post-operative abscess. I don't know. All right. So are we going to say this one? Or jejunum, duodenum, and cecum. 3. Ah. All right, let's see if it's that. I say 3, and that was right. See, show what I know. Something about the colon. See, that's what I know. I'm not part of this. So there's you got it right, seemed pretty sure about it, then you move on. So that's how this program works. Which of the following, then you get rid of that. Which following cell types are absent from the gastric glands found in the body and fundus of the stomach? All right, do you have to know about cell types? That's more histology. Are you guys asked that? I don't think you are. I don't think you do histology. So you just move on. After a positive something, what is the location of referred pain for this lesion? All right, so abdominal seat, so keep that in mind. And I think this was very hard to see if I remember right. So I don't know if that's helpful at all. It's right here. What is the location of that? So who knows what the answer is? Anybody want to take a guess? So anyway, this is how the program works. It gives you sample questions, and then you can find out. It's just a good way to test not only your knowledge, but more often than that. People say, well, these aren't the kind of questions, or this isn't the question. I mean, students want to know the questions they're hoping they see on the exam. But if you get used to reasoning through to the answers based on your knowledge, then you will be able to do the same on the tests.
Can you do a wrong answer so we can see what it tells you?
Sure. It just gives you a nice little red X. And then you go to, whether wrong or right, it gives you the correct answer, and you can always go to the explanation. Wrong or right. You can go right to the explanation. The difference between this and taking the test is you would have gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, submitted your answer, then you would have clicked score, and it would have given you your score and allowed you to then review your questions. So that's how the test works. Like it would go over here to score. Right now it's going to tell me I'm not finished, and I say that's okay. And of course I only got 2 out of 5 because I wasn't. I didn't finish. So and then it goes through and it even evaluates where your strengths were and where your weaknesses were, so you know kind of where you want to go back and study as well. So this is available for everyone. My exams is pretty much like the dashboard. It's just everything I've ever, these are demonstrated. These aren't important. You can, I wouldn't use this either, flashcards. I mean, you can use Quizlet and all the ones that are already made and online before you go to these. This is just creating your own. So that's how each of these parts work. Any questions about, just from your experience taking a test, what tripped you up in taking a test? And see if maybe I can just help with that. So person online, if you want to write, something that if you've had an exam yet, what you felt tripped you up when you, or maybe not, hey, good for you. But if something did, just go ahead and type it in. Well, do you guys have, what do you feel tripped you up on that first exam? You go blank, don't you? And that's where, that really is where, if there's any other way in which you can put yourself in a testing situation, because that's just that test, that's that flight or flight. I have often, when students say they go blank, I've had them come into me and go right to a whiteboard and say, okay, what's a topic you studied 3 days ago? And you say what it is. And then I say, okay, now write what you remember about it. And everybody's first reaction, because it's just, it's blank, right? It's blank, and they have no guide. But then, once that initial, and that's what happens on a test. It's like you go, and everything closes up, and then all of a sudden you can't remember anything. Then you allow time to relax, and then you start writing. Then maybe that triggers something else. And so they learn how, one of the ways to practice that going blank is to do that, is to take a topic from a few days ago, go to a whiteboard in the comfort and safety, but still you're going to have it happen, and just experience that initial, oh my gosh, I can't remember anything, and allow it to calm down, and then you start remembering things. And it's just a way of practicing that over and over again. It does help with that going blank. The other one was we talked about before you got here, is that's when it's good to go to the section of questions that you feel you got down pretty well, and do those first to build your confidence, and then go back to the other ones.
Kyle says, what about the questions that he has trouble with are the ones that say all of the above, none of the above, A and B, B and C, those kind of things trip him up.
Yeah, I don't blame you, Kyle. My background's in education. Let me get a drink here. So that's where my degrees are. We learn never to do that in education with an education degree. It's like, so when I hear that you guys are doing, but unfortunately you have professors who think those are good questions. I honestly think that because they think that's how to create critical questions. So what you're going to have to do, if it says none of the above, all of the above, you know what you're doing? You're turning each one of those lines into a true-false question. Anytime you see all of the above, none of the above, turn it into a true-false question to yourself and read each one and put a little T next to it or a little F next to it. And if there's an F all the way down, then none of the above. That is like one of the worst kinds of questions. You are not testing anyone's knowledge if you're testing what's all wrong. It's just, so yeah, don't get me started. Don't get me started. But there might sometimes be, and the other kind of questions that trip people up are, what is the best answer? What is the best answer? And that's got a lot, yes, you have to reason through to where you get it down to 2. Neither one are wrong, but for some reason, that's a knowledge base. Somewhere along the way, you were told which thing to do first, usually. Or you were told a concept that would tell you which one is to do first. For instance, in medicine and nursing, I think in nursing, they're taught do no harm. So you don't do anything, and you do this in medicine, you don't do invasive first as your first line. You do something simple first. So it might be for nursing, call the doctor, or whatever, or make the patient comfortable, because you don't do harm. So there might be other answers there that would also be perfectly good, but they've been taught that. It's very similar to that. But they're usually for best answer. Somewhere along the way, you've been told something that's helping you get that one. But yeah, I don't blame you. I don't like those kind either. And I hope that helps. Just try that strategy, turning them all into true-false. And that's probably your best strategy for the all of the above, or none of the above, or A and C, or C and D. Just break it down one at a time, because it can be too overwhelming otherwise. Anyone else? Questions about just test taking in general? One of the other things is you cram for short-term memory things that did not stick. You cannot rely on 3 weeks' worth of notes being crammed. Your brain, the frontal lobe of your brain, when you learn about neuroscience and neurology, is where short-term memory is located. And it's a finite amount of neurological space. You can only keep a certain amount of information in there. And when you try to put more in, it overflows. Stuff leaves. So you will end up with just a certain amount of short-term memory stuff. And use it. But use it for that last-minute stuff that didn't stick. That's if you have a test at 8 or 9 in the morning. You study until 10. I know nobody does this. I know, but trust me for a minute. Get up at 5, and then do short-term memory stuff cramming from 5 to 8. That's when you do that last. Don't do it from 10 to 1 and go to bed, and then get up and go to the test. Go to bed a little earlier. Get up earlier. Short-term memory, cram stuff. It's only going to be a certain amount of stuff. And then when you go to class, don't talk to anyone. Go straight to sit down. Because as soon as you start talking to someone and someone starts saying, did you look at this? What is the right answer? Guess what? Something just left because they put something else in. So it's not the time to be social. It's the time to, go right in, sit down, get to work as much as you can. And take advantage of short-term memory. And it's going to be that. It's just what you're going to spew out and forget. That's all right. You are being... So much of what you're all doing is really going to come down to the experience you get, where you're really making the connections.